Recently, there's been a lot of talk in the news, and people have contacted my office regarding the REAL ID and whether Pennsylvania's licenses will become compliant with the REAL ID Act. In 2005, the federal government passed the REAL ID Act, and what that did was it set up minimum standards that states had to adhere to in order to have their issue a license that would be considered, part of a federal identification. And what it would do is really it would turn all of your driver's license and personal information over to be a federal ID. A lot of folks in Pennsylvania at the time had great concerns over turning this much information over to the federal government and whether or not it was even constitutional. Aside from that, the cost of this changing what our Pennsylvania driver's license is now to be compliant with the REAL ID would be about $141 million cost to PennDOT. Currently, to date, we've received about $5 million in grants from the federal government, but there's still a lot of money that would have to be made up. And one of the things that I think that a lot of people are somewhat maybe just don't understand in this whole conversation is the cost factor. You would be generating the cost or turning up the cost of a driver's license that's issued in the state of Pennsylvania to about $110. And anytime you would want to get a new driver's license, you would actually have to go in person to the DMV with a copy of your birth certificate. And for older residents, they'd have to come and they would have to get a new birth certificate because it would be a birth certificate that would require both their parents' names on it, as well as a raised seal. And that was one of the things that came about from the 9/11 Commission. So aside from everything else, you would have to get a new birth certificate. You would have to go to the DMV in person, and you would have to have two other forms of ID. It could be a mail or a billing from the telephone company or anything like that, showing your address and your name on it. And that would be very cumbersome, especially if you have a lot of senior citizens who just have an ID, they don't have a driver's license, and they'd have to go in person. So it would be difficult. Also, PennDOT would have to hire a lot of employees if you're going to bring that many more people into the DMV. We already have long wait times, and I think it would be very cumbersome for the public. One of the things, since this law has been enacted, every year we have gotten an exemption from the federal government so that federal office buildings and airlines would still accept a Pennsylvania driver's license. This past year, the Obama administration, when it left office, did not grant that extension. Once again, there was 9 other states like Pennsylvania. So this isn't something that was just strictly to Pennsylvania. There's also 9 other states that lost that exemption. The new administration has given an exemption, I believe, up till June as of right now. We are trying to work out an agreement between PennDOT and the federal government to make sure that we're going to be compliant. Right now, residents can still use their driver's license up till January 30th of 2018 to get on a plane for domestic flights. They can go and get a passport. Obviously, if they're going to be traveling internationally, going to Canada or going on a cruise line, they're most likely going to want to have a passport, and you can obtain that passport. And I think the costs are about $160 or $110, and those passports are good for 10 years. So that is a federal ID. You can also get a passport card, which would cost about $30, and that would be good for domestic flights. So no way are we intending to require every resident of Pennsylvania to have to go and get a passport in order to travel or fly somewhere domestically. However, we're still trying to work those issues out with the federal government. I think asking every Pennsylvania resident to have to go to the DMV every time they need to get their driver's license renewed and upping that cost to $110 is going to be a huge cost to the residents here in the state of Pennsylvania, and also very burdensome and are overloading that PennDOT system. So I'm hopeful that over the upcoming weeks we're going to be able to work out something with the federal government, because at the end of the day, we want to ensure that the public is safe. But I would also ask the federal government if they're going to continue to to force or to impose these REAL IDs on the residents of Pennsylvania. I think they should also ensure that they are strengthening our borders to not allow people that want to do us harm into the country and enforcing the visa program. And I'm happy to say that the current administration seems to have taken steps in that direction. So I think if you're going to ask residents of Pennsylvania to pay more for their driver's license or have to jump through more hoops to get that renewed, I think the least the federal government can do before imposing that upon the residents here is to actually hold up their end of the bargain and ensure that our borders are safe and that the people that are coming in and out of this country are not going to do us harm.